Thank you for that, Al. My name is Derek Dioria. I am the Executive Director of Walworth County Economic Development Alliance, or WCEDA, as we're affectionately known. Again, really happy to have so many community leaders here. This is a topic that doesn't have an easy solution, and it's really going to take people like you in the room to try to solve this. So appreciate you taking a good portion of your morning to be here. I know Mark Luberta, who is next to me, will talk a little bit more about how we got to this point, but I just briefly want to thank the Health and Human Services Department through the CHIP process, which is the Community Health Improvement Plan. They have been really instrumental in helping us get to this point. There are many people that I should be thanking, but and also through the county zoning, and also really the county board for funding our proposal. Mark will again talk a little bit more about that, but just supporting this effort today with the summit to kick off our effort going forward. And so this is not just a one-time thing. This will kick off at least a 12-month effort around housing. So really appreciate that. I want to thank the Abbey too for helping in part sponsor this event, and for Carrie Kurger, who's been involved in a lot of these sessions over the past year and a half around this. So thank you. And also Ryan Benchheimer from Ideal Impressions to help with the videography, which I think will be really important for those that were here or not here to share. So, you know, we know that there's an expected shortage, and we have that on your at the table there, of approximately 5,600 units over the next 5 years or so. And so, you know, costs are escalating. You're going to hear a little bit more about that later, but we know that we have an issue. And so I just want to tell you what I think to expect for this. So I had instructed, we have a lot of panelists, and I wanted to feature them because they've been involved in a lot of cases in kind of the planning leading up to this, and they're involved in really shaping this. So I wanted them to be here to comment, to give you some quick things that they're seeing or ideas to think about, and eventually we'll be able to go a little deeper with all of them kind of going forward. So you'll see a lot, but it'll be probably pretty you know, short and sweet, hopefully. And really want to have your input during this. So we've embedded some polling to show some things. We really are looking forward to the end session of brainstorming, and love to get your ideas that we will then use going forward. So I'd love to introduce Mark just to say a few words. He's been very helpful in helping WCEDA put the proposal together, and for our board to help get our hands around this and what we want to do. So Mark, if you could just say a few minutes. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Derek. It is nice to see everybody here. Welcome to the effort that WCEDA is kicking off today. And in thanking you for coming, I want to give you some background on why you're here today, where this came from. Derek made a reference to thanking Health and Human Services because they have a statutory requirement where they go through and develop a community health improvement program, and they look at a broad range of areas. And in this particular year, they spent more time than they typically have on the issue of housing. And Derek got involved in that group, along with our county zoning and a broad range of other people. Sewer PAC was a key player in that, because what public health concluded is that housing and affordable housing is an essential component of the health of a community and the health of the populace of the community. And with that subgroup working on that topic, Derek ended up being the leader. And so for the last year, because that started in more than a year, in 2021, Derek's really been touching on the housing issue. And then just about a year ago, as part of the early stages of the county undertaking a year-long strategic planning effort, I'm on the WCEDA board, and I proposed to the board, what more could the county be doing in economic development? And I didn't say housing, I said economic development. And it was the board that, as they talked about where the community was growing and what was impacting economic development, they sort of started talking more about housing. It actually took them a couple months and a couple meetings to really reach the conclusion that housing is a core component of what WCEDA should be considering, a core component of their mission. And so with that, the board had Derek start thinking about a proposal that they could give the county. Well, in the meantime, the county board itself, as I said, is undertaking a strategic planning session. They started with some serious efforts and a long discussion on transportation early this year. And then they had their second round, which was in early July, where they spent a special county board committee of the whole meeting just talking about housing. And I sort of pulled together some information from all across the state, all across the county, and laid some of that information out to them. And that happened, I believe, the week after WCEDA had presented us with their proposal for how WCEDA could engage in that housing effort, try and engage the community in housing. The county board forwarded the topic to the finance committee, I believe, the next week, and by early August had funded WCEDA's proposal that let Derek take what started as engagement with the Community Health Improvement Plan to all of a sudden he's got a full year-long project on housing that reaches all of you. And so that's sort of why you're all here today, because that process, everybody from different angles, whether it's public health to county government to economic development, realize that housing and the issue of affordable housing and sufficient housing touches everyone. So thank you all for coming. I think what we will see is everybody has a role to play in moving this issue forward and being able to address this as a community. So I'm excited for today's sort of kickoff session, and really want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to come today, and welcome to the Housing Summit.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Stephen Roark. In the South, where I was born in Georgia, they say Roark. If you'd like to have a little help in remembering my name, we're in the great state of Wisconsin where there's a lot of water. You paddle a boat, you row an ark. So if you think about rowing an ark, you'll always remember my name. If you see me at a summit or a conference, just raise your hand and say, Roark, come on over. Roark, let's get a coffee. Roark is the way to remember me, and I'll be eager to sit down and have a conversation with you. This is not my usual format in talking with people, because I like conversation. I don't always know what to say until I start asking questions and listening to other people. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about our company. I was born in Georgia, graduated university, bought a one-way ticket to New York City to get off the farm. I spent 25 years in New York financing commercial real estate projects. I worked in the tax-exempt bond department at BB&T Corporation, which is now Truist Bank. So I financed a lot of projects using tax-exempt bonds, tax credits, private equity, etc. I left banking in 2011 because of Dodd-Frank and the restrictions imposed upon me as a banker, and I became a developer. I used my talents from knowing how to finance projects to being a developer of projects. I was invited to Wisconsin in 2019. It was my first time ever coming to Wisconsin. I bought a few buildings, I invested in some land, some projects, and I was introduced to a company in Appleton because I needed a planner, designer, and architectural firm. I was introduced to Hoffman Planning, Design, and Construction in Appleton, Wisconsin. Hoffman Planning, Design, and Construction is a design build construction management firm. After talking with them and working with them for a while, we decided that we would form Hoffman Development Group. Their design build, I'm finance. Through our collective efforts, we are now a design build finance commercial real estate development company. We have a national footprint, primarily in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic. Happy to be in Wisconsin. What I'd like to tell people is the way to survive New York City is to get back to the farm as often as you can. So here I am. We are a national commercial real estate development company. We have a few value propositions. Number one is that we have partnered we are Hoffman Development Group and Hoffman Planning, Design, and Construction, two firms, the development arm and the affiliate that is the backbone. We partnered with Cedar Prize. Cedar Prize is also a development company that has an affiliate firm that does the site, civil, and infrastructure work. Collectively, we can do about 97% of the work that's required in-house to develop commercial real estate projects. The only services that we do not provide in-house are those that are required by financing to close financing. Those are appraisals, market reports, environmental reports, etc. Those have to be independent and third party. Everything except for those items that have to be independent, we can do in-house. One of our value propositions is that we're willing to do all of that work in advance, at risk, on our balance sheet before we finance and build the project. And I say that because there is a difference in how we do things and how other developers may do things. Number one, we do not develop for our own portfolio. We complete all the pre-development work to the point where the project can be financed, and then we assign it to an ownership group who hires us to complete the project for them. So we are not owners at risk, we are developers at risk. And that's a very unique distinguishing factor. We are not doing this work so that we can profit, we're doing it so that we can earn fees. If there's a profit motive or a profit potential, that belongs to someone else. So we are taking extraordinary risks with very little upside except for the fee that we're going to earn. This is an affordable housing summit, so we're going to address affordable housing. It's very, very complicated and difficult and time-consuming and arduous, and it requires a lot of patience to develop affordable housing. Probably everyone in this room knows that. It takes 18 months to 24 months sometimes before you can break ground. And for that 18 to 24 months, we are contributing our time, our services, our energy, hoping that we can develop a project. There's a process, and this summit is about, my part of this summit, my part of this meeting is to talk about the process. We asked the municipality for what might be available as public information. That might be a comprehensive plan, a countywide survey, a countywide market report, and we review what's available publicly. We look at a particular piece of dirt, we look at the zoning, we look at the density, and we work to determine what can be built on a particular site. We prepare a preliminary design, budget, and financial pro forma to greenlight that internally before we ever engage with the landowner. Once we are confident that we can plan, design, finance, and build a project on a particular piece of dirt, then we will ask to be engaged formally as the developer with the landowner. We prefer to work with municipalities because they are more patient. It's public land versus private land. But if we're talking to someone who's a private landowner, typically they're looking to sell the property in 3 to 6 months. They're not as patient as what we need in a partner. We need 18 to 24 months. Once we enter into a development agreement, we complete the pre-development work to the point where we can close financing We assign the project to a new owner, we close financing, and we build it. The type of projects that we prefer to build are either master plan developments or single standalone projects. Currently, we are in Wapaka County. We are in a development agreement with the city of Wapaka. It's 80 acres, master plan development. The first project is multifamily housing, medium density, and what that does is that creates the property taxes that the municipality needs for the infrastructure for the next phase, which will be senior housing, a hotel, single family homes. So our project kickstarts the 80-acre master plan development. That's what a project needs. It needs some sort of instigator to create the property taxes so that the municipality has the capital that they need to put the infrastructure in for later phases. We have a similar situation in Jefferson County, Fort Atkinson, about 75 acres. First project there again is multifamily housing with an affordable component. We're in Campbellsport, Fond du Lac County, 30 acres, same situation. In every location, we're building 120 to 140 units of multifamily housing. Our process is that first, we have to determine the demand for the number of affordable units for that particular location. That requires our own due diligence initially, and then a market report to support the work that we have done. We use Bowen National Research. They're also used by WCEDA. They're approved and authorized by WCEDA to prepare market reports for developers that are going to use tax credits and tax-exempt bond financing. We do our preliminary work. Bowen is engaged to do a market report to support our work, and then we know that we have designed a project that we can finance and build. Once we determine the affordable component, we maximize the number of units that are affordable within our design based upon zoning, and then we fill out the project with market rate units. So what you have is a mixed tenant environment. For the affordable component, we're solving for tenants with an average of 60% of the area median household income. In this particular county, the average median income is approaching $70,000. I believe I looked and it was $67,000 and change. By the time we close financing, because the average median income has been increasing year over year, we would pro forma this at $70,000 per year on an average median income. That means for the affordable unit, people that make $42,000 a year at most, which is 60% of the area median income. So for the affordable units, that's our target client, our target tenant. 60% of the area median income, those that make no greater than $42,000 a year. The market rate, there's no limitation on those. Because there are income restrictions for the tenants in the affordable units, that drives what we can charge as lease rates. It's 30% of their income. Those numbers are also provided by us from HUD, which is on the WCEDA website. Because the revenues from the affordable units don't support the financing for the project, we need to maximize the number of tax credits that the project receives. And those are sold into the marketplace to generate the equity, which is why we maximize the number of affordable units to begin with. The tax credits are driven from the construction dollars associated with the affordable units. That's why we maximize the affordable units, to maximize the tax credits, to maximize the equity that goes into the project, so that we need less bond financing, less debt financing. So we're deleveraging the project from a debt financing standpoint to make it work. The last component that we need, and this is very important, is that the project needs to be within a TIF district or a TID. We do need tax reimbursement to help support the project. We cannot, as good citizens, expect people who live in affordable housing to be paying the same property tax rate as those that are living in market rate housing. It's a regressive tax on affordable housing. The accountants in the room will know what I'm talking about. that is who we are. That is what we do. We're eager to get into conversation with anyone and everyone. We prefer public land. We will work with private landowners. In Campbellsport, the municipality has a purchase option agreement with the landowner for 5 years. So they're working with a private individual so that we have public land by the time we close financing. We're willing to partner with anyone, municipalities, private landowners. We do more than affordable housing. We do everything except for single-family homes and high-tech industry. So I know there are a lot of people in here very interested in affordable single-family homes, starter homes, that can be part of a master plan development that would follow us after we do the multifamily housing. In all of our locations, we have preferred single-family home developers, multiple builders in each of the locations that are tracking with us, following with us, building the single-family homes, twin homes, quads, eights, etc. Our minimum project size is about 40 units. On a garden-style 2-story walk-up, the turnkey is about $250,000 per unit. That's a total development budget. We are using institutional capital. They typically won't look at a project that's less than $10 million as a total development budget. So we typically don't look at projects less than 40 units. And the largest project that we have right now is 140 units. And that's a $30 million project. There's no project that's too small. There's no project that's too large. We've done projects as small as $2 million for drive-through restaurants. We've done $100 million plus as CCRC projects. Don't think of us as housing developers, affordable housing developers. Think of us as developers that can help you with your economic development and the housing to support the development. Because as Mark said earlier, economic development and housing development go hand in hand. One of the reasons we're focusing on affordable housing is everyone's asking us to help with affordable housing. Governments, municipalities, business owners, citizenry are asking us to help with affordable housing. One of the things we're doing is building dedicated employee housing for corporations, because you may or may not know this, but there are companies that are buying up hotels so they can house their employees. I've only been in Wisconsin since 2019, so don't ask me to name highways or name hotels, but I know the hotels that some of these companies are buying, and they're 100% full of employees. They are not available to the public. There's a housing crisis in Wisconsin. One of the reasons I'm in Wisconsin. It's not just to get back to the farm. This is where the demand is. This is where I can do a heck of a lot of projects before I retire.
One of the reasons I wanted Stephen just to talk about is you can hear how they go in and potentially work with other developers, with community partners to kickstart some things, and just that process to be thinking, even if ours would be different, or obviously there's many ways to do that, but you can see that what's necessary to make some attainable, affordable housing. And so hopefully that'll be helpful as we talk a little bit later. But so I'd like to move on here to our next speaker. And again, I had met Kurt Paulson at the County Housing Summit, had seen him at a few others, and just in general have learned that he is definitely a housing expert in the area here, and really happy to have him come and just give us a little bit of a background, throw some data behind what we're doing. One of the things that he is known for, he had authored a report that was funded by the Wisconsin Realtor Association in 2019, and it was entitled Falling Behind: Addressing Wisconsin's Workforce Housing Shortage to Strengthen Families, Communities, and our Economy. And so I'd like to bring Kurt up here, and I think you'll find some of that information real interesting. So thanks for being here, Kurt.
Thank you, Jeff, and County Administrator. And good morning, and I'm sorry you haven't eaten yet, so you don't have any tomatoes to throw at me. So it was great to hear from Mr. Roark, and as a public sector person, I cannot stress that enough. That and this is the basis of the real estate school at UW-Madison with Mr. Grasking. That good quality development is a good quality product that is a dialogue of a community, public sector and private sector, to think about what the future will look like. And so I'm really excited that you have municipal panels up here and people from the development industry. And oftentimes, we're at loggerheads, but we got to find a way to work together with the conversation, because as has been said already, housing and economic development go hand in hand. And as we like to say, housing is economic development because a home is where a job goes to sleep at night, right? If you can't get workers to your job, then you are really struggling. So, but I'm a professor and it's Monday morning and it's raining, so nothing's gonna get you excited like a quiz, right? So this is called active learning. We're gonna make you talk amongst your table groups for 1 or 2 minutes just to get the juices flowing. So, thinking about housing prices in your city or region in the next 10 years, right, adjusted for inflation, because economists love to adjust for inflation. Do you want housing prices in your city or region to be higher than they are today, about the same, or lower? So talk amongst your tables and try to answer that question. This is an old trick that college professors use to make sure that your students are awake. So you force them to talk to each other and answer a question. And as you've already also figured out as a professor, it's a trick question, right? There's always a trick, because this is kind of the most important issue, and yet I would imagine that there's quite a strong difference of opinion. So let me start by quoting that great housing scholar and philosopher, Taylor Swift. It's me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me. And I'll tell you why, because my house has gone up in value, quite a lot. I locked in a mortgage at 2.75%. So I ain't moving. So I'm an incumbent homeowner. I can tell you what I would want to tell my city officials. Make prices keep going up. Because if you keep building more housing, people are going to move here. And if you build more housing and lower the price, or lower the rate of growth of the price, then more people are going to move here, and that's going to lower my property values or slow the rate of growth of my property values. So if I already live here, my answer is I want housing prices to go higher, because then I can cash out. But I heard an employer talking, right? If you're an employer, it's the opposite, right? If we're worried about housing affordability, we want house prices to go down. So there is a correct answer to this question, but I'm a good professor trick, so I'm not going to tell you what the answer is yet. So we're going to move very quickly through a lot of data, and I want to try to put the puzzle pieces together for you. So the important thing is to use the data to tell a story about how the pieces fit together. And we're going to start just by looking at on the demand side. As Mr. Roark mentioned, there's a lot of housing demand in Wisconsin, a lot of pent-up demand. And housing demand comes from two sources: jobs and income. Well, the third source is, of course, demography, because everyone gets older. It's not destiny, but it's pretty close, right? So, fastest growing household size in the state, 1-person households, followed by 2-person households. We are losing 3- and 4-person households. So unless we have a government policy that forces people to take on roommates, what this means is that household size is shrinking. We need to think about building more flexible and creative housing units, smaller housing units, twin homes, townhomes, condos, not just the large lot single family. Of course, there's always going to be a demand for some large lot single family, but that's really a shrinking demand. And we're growing older. So we have a negative population growth rate, birth through 24. We just have a slight uptick in 24 to 44-year-old households. And then my category, somewhere in there, 45 to 54, we're shrinking, not sure why. But then, of course, we have a growing elderly and senior citizen population. So as we think about economic development and housing, we need to attract, recruit, and retain a shrinking pool of younger families and workers. This becomes the real challenge, right? And the households who are at their prime home buying years and thinking about where to put down roots really do have a lot of options, because we're competing for the same workforce that every other state is, right? And that's why County Executive Showman up in Washington County says retention is the new recruitment. You just have to keep the young people you have growing up in your community to stay in your community. Okay, like a pig through a python, have you ever heard of that metaphor? The two largest generations in American history are the baby boomers and the millennials. And who's Gen X? We're kind of stuck in the middle, right? We just watch cartoons and let ourselves in after school. So nobody thinks about Gen X, which is fine with us, right? So two trends. If you think of nothing else, think of two mega trends. Baby boomers are living longer, and that's a good thing. They're staying in their homes longer. That's a good thing, right? But they're not churning through that housing stock anywhere near any previous generation. Millennials, the largest generation in American history. The peak millennial is at the peak home buying years, right? 28 to 34, that's that sweet spot where people establish families, they establish careers, they establish households. And if you can't provide housing opportunities for them, they will leave and go somewhere else. Many of our counties are slow growing. We don't have as many counties in the southeast or south central of Wisconsin that are losing population. But again, other than Dane County, most of our growth rates are slow, which is both a positive virtue and a challenge, right? Because if it's slow, it doesn't create that same crisis momentum to really generate excitement. So on the supply side, very quickly, you have units and you have prices, right? I always say to people, housing is more than supply or demand, right? It's about homes, it's about communities, it's about families. So it's much more than supply and demand. But it's actually not less than supply and demand. It is a market. It's produced at cost. Interest rates, construction costs that we'll talk about, all affect the price and the availability of housing. So this is the big graph, and I've just updated it through the end of 2022. So Wisconsin used to build a lot of housing. Many of you remember those days. From the 90s up until about 2006, we built a lot of housing. So the blue line is lots that are created when you record a subdivision plat with the Department of Administration. Right, so this is future building supply for single family homes. It's a lot on which you can build a house. So you see the blue line. We used to build a lot of those, and we're still finishing up some of that inventory. But for the last 16 years, we've not developed many housing lots. Same with orange, which is the single family building permits. We just don't build a lot of housing. We fell off like most other states since the Great Recession, and we simply have not recovered. We're going to talk about some of those structural reasons. Building permits per thousand, or building permits per capita, is the key measure of housing supply. And we used to build about 6.78 for every 1,000 people in the state. We have ticked up a little bit in the last couple of years, but we're still less than half, right? So think about what this means. We used to build housing. Housing was affordable. Our communities were growing. We've just not built a lot of housing in the last 15 years. And as I've said before, if you're adding population, you're adding jobs, you're adding households, but you're not adding enough housing units, that's the squeeze. We see that in terms of prices, we see that in terms of vacancy rates, we see that in terms of employers not being able to find workers. So this is your slide for Walworth County, same story. You used to build a lot, right? In a good year, you might have 500 to 700 single-family building permits constructed. In your best year recently, in 2021, you only built about 400. So again, Derek talked about this deficit, and you'll hear more from the sewer pack and the UW Whitewater study, which shows you how many units you need. But if you can find a way within your county to build about 700 to 800 units of single-family housing every year, do that for 10 years, you can start to dig yourself out of the hole. Right, not a lot of multifamily construction. It's not as heavily an urbanized area. Most of those are located in Whitewater and a few, I think, in Elkhorn. Okay, so as a state, we used to build. The red line is for Wisconsin. Go Badgers. Right, sorry if there's any Marquette people here, but... we used to build more on a per capita basis than the rest of the United States. Great Recession hit. Everybody went down. We have not recovered. Other states have. That's really the squeeze that we're seeing in Wisconsin. Okay, and if you want data tables, a lot of our large counties have underproduced housing. So how do I count underproducing? If you add 1,000 households to your community, but you only add 800 housing units, then you have underproduced 200 housing units. And there you see that when I first wrote the report and sounded the alarm bell in 2019, I called it falling behind, because we were about 19,000 units short, just based on past deficit. So if I write a new version, I'll call it fallinger behinder, because it's up to 34,000 right now. And there you can see Walworth County's numbers. Where did Walworth County go? Walworth County. You're about 739 units short. So that's not dealing with the forecast of future growth, future households. This is households that have moved to your county, but you haven't built enough housing for them. And that number has increased over the last couple of years. So when we talk about housing, we talk about jobs. When we talk about jobs, we talk about housing. Of course, the state has different regions, right? So Dane, Brown, and Waukesha County, these are our job centers. No surprise. And we have a jobs housing balance in those states that is really high. And that means that for my state, my county of Dane County, the census tells us 100,000 people work in the county but don't live in the county, right? And that spillover comes over to Jefferson and Greene and Dodge counties and Rock County as well, right? And so one of the things we know is if you don't have enough housing in the communities where you have jobs, either you don't get the workers or workers have to live far away. So I like to always tell this story to personalize it. I was getting my hair cut a couple weeks ago, and there were two people working in it. This is in Madison. One of them lives in Janesville, and the other lives in Sauk, right? So we know that people are driving up to an hour for even service sector jobs. And you talk to anyone in the hospitality industry, as you have here in Walworth County, and this is a major, major change. Because we haven't built a lot of housing, a lot of our housing is old. What this means is that in any given housing market, the housing that people are going to consume is usually older housing, and that means we have to think seriously not just about building new units, but helping people to rehab and upgrade the older units. Anyone involved in construction knows it's really hard to get lending, right? So maybe a shorthand for you is there's 4 L's to housing construction, right? Land, labor, lumber, and lending. Right, and so it's we're just going to talk about how bad things are right now for a few minutes, right? So banks have tightened up lending standards. Not just that it's expensive to get credit, oftentimes you can't get credit, right? Unless you have really good private capital, right? Single-family construction costs since January 2020, before the pandemic, are up 36%, and multifamily is up 37.5%. If it costs a lot of money to build something new, the price and value of the existing supply will also go up, right? Think about during the pandemic when we couldn't build cars. The price of used cars went up because the closest substitute to a new car is a used car. In the same way that the closest substitute to a new home is a used home. So we have price pressure coming just from the fact that construction costs have gone through the roof in the last 3 years. Even if we waved a magic wand at this summit and we got everybody to play ball in terms of land and lumber and municipal fees and permit processes and zoning and subdivisions, we don't have enough bodies to build housing. We have a construction employment in the state that is still less than 2005. So whatever you're doing in terms of housing and thinking about economic development and workforce development, you have to think seriously about growing a labor force in the construction and allied trades, and that means partnering with tech colleges, with high schools, a lot of really interesting things also up in Washington County, right? I want to say as a college professor, right, that we need a lot more people to decide not to go to college and rack up lots of debt, but to enter the trades and to make working with your hands valuable again. Because we need to build houses, we need places for people to live, we need to retrofit all of our old houses, and we just don't have enough bodies. House prices have gone up a lot just in the last 3 years. So in Walworth County, your median sales price is now over $385,000. That's up about 40% in the last 3 years. So whose income has gone up 40% in the last 3 years? So, and if you raise your hand, then I want to talk to you because I want to borrow some money. Okay, so what does this mean in terms of the pinch of housing affordability? Mortgage rates are going up 7.19%. I told you that I locked in my rate at 2.75. I ain't moving, right? So the Fed raises interest rates to slow down the economy, and what this means is that people stop buying houses. So normally in a normal housing market, when interest rates go up, house prices go down because it reduces demand. But house prices keep going up because there's such a demand for housing. So even though it's more expensive, there's still such a demand because everybody needs a place to live. Right? I think the era of cheap money is over. I think we're going to go back to 5 or 6% interest rates, which my mom would say is easy interest rates because she remembers when it was 13 or 14%, right? So any hardship story I as a Gen X tell, you know, the silent generation has a worse hardship story. So. What does this mean? In February 2022, if you wanted to buy with a low down payment, so like an FHA entry-level house product at 3.89% interest to buy the median priced home in Wisconsin, you would need $63,000 in income. Right? Now, you need $104,000 in income just to buy the median price with a low down payment FHA affordable product. Right? So this is the double squeeze. Interest rates are going up, so your mortgage is more expensive. House prices are going up, so your dollar goes less far. Right? This is the squeeze that's going to continue to face us as long as interest rates are high and construction costs are high. So anything we can do together to lower the price and cost of housing helps to improve that price point at which your workers can get into housing. Vacancies are really low. We normally think of a vacancy rate for apartments somewhere between 5 and 7% is good. It's a balance between landlords and tenants. Now it's been below that for the last 4.5 years. Homeowner vacancy rates used to vary between 1 and 2% in the state. Now it's less than 0.5%. There's just no inventory, right? So this is the kind of triple whammy. There's nowhere to live, and the places to live are more expensive, and interest rates are higher. This is kind of like doom and gloom. I got to come up with a happy story. Okay, no surprise, housing affordability has declined in every region. So one of the things this also means is that home ownership rates have been particularly hard hit for younger workers. So home ownership rates for those over 65 have stayed the same. That's good, right? People are staying in their homes. But we've seen the most significant drop-off of any of our neighboring states in home ownership rates for 25 to 34-year-old households. Right? And again, that age group where people establish themselves, establish their employment, establish themselves in terms of family and housing. And if you can't find a way to keep and house your 25 to 34-year-old workforce, they're going to leave, which then in the next decade will be even more of a challenge. And of course, we have to emphasize that this housing cost burden does not affect everyone equally. We have the 6th worst black home ownership rate in the United States, in the state of Wisconsin, and we saw one of the most significant declines in the Great Recession in our black home ownership rate. So the housing affordability crisis is affecting everyone. Workers, middle-class workers, employers. But of course, those of our workers who are on the lower end of the wage scale, the people who are serving us today in this beautiful hotel, they're particularly squeezed in terms of finding an affordable and decent place to live. So what I do want to talk about is some of the solutions. So this is teeing you up for the kind of problem solving that you will all be working on at this summit. But I do want to say thank you and congratulate ourselves. Right, we're good Midwesterners. We don't like to congratulate ourselves here in Wisconsin. But because of the bipartisan concern about housing affordability, and shortage in our workforce, on a bipartisan basis, the state legislature and the governor signed a series of kind of really exciting housing packages just over the summer. So this is the first time that dollars have been sent to WCEDA to run these loan programs of general purpose revenue, meaning that the state taxpayers are recognizing this as a concern, and they've made a $525 million investment. So just very quickly, that's the website of WCEDA. If you are a developer or a municipal official, or you know or love a developer or municipal official, you want to sign up for the email alerts. And Jeff in the back is from WCEDA. You want to raise your hand? And ask him questions later on his panel. The most up-to-date information is at their website. These packages were rolled out in the summer, and WCEDA has been working super hard to come up with the program regulations, the term sheets, the specifics. So, millions of dollars for restoring Main Street. Like most of you, if you think about most of our small towns and cities, we have commercial on the main street, and usually there was an apartment on the second floor, but a lot of those apartments have become vacant. So this provides very low-cost loans to redevelop those to rehab those properties, to make that housing viable. That creates, again, that walkable customer base for Main Street. We have a lot of vacant commercial land, and there's programs and dollars available to help convert vacant commercial land into housing. The largest is the infrastructure access, which would allow a developer to get access to low-cost financing for the upfront infrastructure for a subdivision. As any developer will tell you, the roads, water, sewer, and the land costs are quite extensive, and that's all out of pocket. And again, if it takes 18 to 36 months just to get your first housing lot sold, that's a significant carrying cost. Every one of these fees and programs can help reduce the cost of housing or can increase the cost of housing. What a lot of these programs have in common, which is what you're going to be working on today, is this. And I realize I just put legislative text up on the screen. That's a snooze fest right there, right? But in order to be eligible, the municipality has to have reduced the cost of housing, either by revising your zoning ordinances, your subdivision regulations, to increase development density, or expedite approvals, or reduce impact fees, or reduce parking, building, or other development costs, right? So the legislature was very clear. This is not just free money. The municipality has to document and demonstrate that they have made significant reforms that reduce the regulatory costs of housing, right? And so this is just good practice for all of us to examine every single one of our zoning ordinances, permit approval processes, subdivision ordinances, building code regulations, everything that adds to the cost of housing or adds to the delay in production helps to continue this squeeze, and everything you can do to reduce the cost of housing, reduce parking requirements, reduce lot sizes, allow twin homes, allow maybe cottage clusters or senior housing that has accessory dwellings so that grandma can live with the family. All of these help increase the supply of housing, reduce the cost of housing, and will really help us address our housing shortage. So thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to your solution.
What questions? Okay, John.
First of all, your presentation was phenomenal, and a lot of that we were probably going to talk about as builders today too. I think the biggest issue we had is there was an abundance of land to developers that didn't communicate to other developers that I'm bringing on 200 lots, you're bringing on 100 lots, you're bringing on 50, you're bringing on 60, and we all of a sudden didn't realize the absorption was not there. So when the slowdown did hit, we ended up with a lot of fully improved property. And plus the biggest thing is the villages and cities and the city fathers also took the main hit with finishing public improvements from failure of developers. And it just went on and on. I think what has taken place over the last 10 years, and I watch daily land like all of us do, the absorption on the land acquisition has been small, but it's been gobbled up. And it wasn't like it just got all eaten up, but it just got eaten up like a Pac-Man. And now if you take a look at, and it would have been nice if, one more chart, how much fully improved vacant land or fully improved development is still sitting there undeveloped. I know Whitewater had one that was available recently, and there's I'm still working on in Walworth that was developed 12 years ago, and currently now they're really, if you look around, even scattered vacant lots for young builders, and Walworth County has probably the best building profile developers and builders in the county. I mean, we all get along, we all work together in harmony, but the land is being eaten up and scarce. So now, as developers, we're gonna have to come back, and I'd like to know how you figure out this one, try to get back into the likings of the communities, saying that we don't have the X on our shoulder and we're not gonna just run away, but we need concessions to start the affordable housing process.
Yeah, a lot of people left the industry, and a lot of the, there's a lot of hangover from the Great Recession, right? Banks were holding land, municipalities were holding land.
And that's one of the reasons why a land development loan, right, it was really hard to get in the last 15 years. It still is, right? But as you point out, there's just not a lot of vacant parcels left to build on. That's been gobbled up slowly, right? So we're kind of eating down the seed corn of the run-up in 04 and 05 and 06 when we did create a lot of lots. But I just want to emphasize what Stephen said and what you know, which is, you know, if we want to deliver an affordable entry-level new home product, right, for a nurse or a teacher, we're really looking at, we'd like to get that price point in Walworth County. Every time I use a number, people are going to laugh. Somewhere between 275 to 325,000, right? And you know, if I gave you the land and the infrastructure for free, you still couldn't, with construction costs, make that work. Now, maybe if we value engineered a bunch of units in a small subdivision where you have 5,000 square foot lots and no basements, 3 bed, 2 bath, 1,600 square feet, you know, not a lot of customization, you could maybe start to get to that price point. But again, if you're paying $150,000 to $200,000 for a lot, you're not going to build a $300,000 home on that lot. You're going to build a $600,000 home. Right, there's a vacant lot near me if anyone wants to come and build in Middleton, Wisconsin. The lot is $270,000. It's fully finished, right? And then if you look at developing new property, new dirt, again, that's why I think where the infrastructure bill that the legislature passed would be really helpful. If I'm looking to do a couple hundred units and I've got to pay $6 to $9 million for the land and then put in, I'm just eyeballing it, $20 to $30 million in roads, water, sewer, I'm out a lot of cash up front. And I won't make that back until I sell most of my lots. That's just not a value proposition for most banks right now, especially with the Fed tightening lending standards on commercial real estate. So that's where I think where the program of Fund WCEDA can be really helpful. And that means where a municipality is sitting down with a developer, looking at your cost structure, having that kind of good faith negotiation that says, what do you need, what can we do to help guarantee that loan, help make sure that the payback happens when the lots are sold rather than up front. But it's a steep hill to climb, right? I mean, that's where I think every municipal official should be in contact with developers and say, what are you hearing on the ground? Like, are there any lots actually available? And if not, what can we do to help you make those? Right? And maybe that means everything, including, you know, do we need a 24-foot wide roadway? Maybe we could do an 18-foot road wide way, right? Maybe we don't need sidewalk on both sides. I say this as an urban planner, we like sidewalks, but you know, stormwater, everything that adds to the cost is going to add to the price. And so it is a different mindset of local government officials to say, rather than how can we get to know, right? Because let's be honest, there's a lot of municipalities where they say they want housing, but their incumbent homeowners don't really want housing. And if they do want housing, they want that $550,000 to $600,000 house, right? Oh, you got to have brick. You got to have you got to have parking on both sides of the street, right? You got to have a 60-foot lot width. You got to, each one of those requirements keeps adding to the cost. So.
If I may.
Yes.
Thank you. 70% of the lenders in the state of Wisconsin have stopped lending. There is no money in the state of Wisconsin, and I say that literally, with a little bit of liberty. There is still money if you've got a huge balance sheet and are willing to personally guarantee the repayment of the financing. We are a solutions provider. We resolve the disconnect between infrastructure and facility needs and creative planning, design, financing, and construction. I do split my time between New York City and Wisconsin about 60-40. I bring institutional capital, private capital, family office capital. I am outside the banking environment, and there is still billions of dollars out there solely dedicated to affordable housing. One of our preferred financing groups has a $7 billion portfolio. All they provide financing for is affordable multifamily housing projects. They are tracking with us in Wisconsin. They are looking at every project that we have in pre-development, and they have virtually unlimited capital. They are turning away capital because they manage money. So it's family offices trying to give them money so that they can invest. They're having to turn away capital because there aren't enough developers out there like us developing affordable housing projects. I will also add, if you've noticed, we're in Wapaka County, Jefferson County, Fond du Lac County, and now Walworth County, hopefully. We are in rural Wisconsin. We are not in Madison. We are not in Milwaukee. We are servicing the rural segment of Wisconsin, and we do that with purpose. I was born and raised in a town with a population of 500, so I can relate to all of the areas that I visit in Wisconsin. It was a 30-minute drive to the major town of 60,000, which was Valdosta, Georgia. So I know what it means to have a shortage of affordable housing, have a demand for affordable housing, have people that have true needs and are having to double up in mobile homes and share mobile homes so they can be close to work. We're a solutions provider. That's why I'm here. That's why Derek invited me. So I'll end with that.
Thank you, Stephen. I think maybe one more question. Do we have time?
Hi, my name is Sarah Nichols. I'm the Executive Director for Open Arms Free Clinic. And Derek, I want to hats off to you on bringing two amazing speakers to kick off the summit. I've been part of this community programming. And I wanted to say for Open Arms Free Clinic, we have 85% of our patients are working in here in Walworth County. 75% of them are housing insecure. I care about the health of my patients, and so having a stable roof over their head is important. You had mentioned earlier about there are so many homes that could get rehabbed, and I have neighbors who are zoning officers who are putting these houses on auction because they're beyond repair. Maybe I'm naive, but can developers rehab homes and use if you can't get the lot, can you use that money to rehab a home and then sell it? It's just some of the ideas of solutions, and Youth Build can rehab homes, and Habitat for Humanity can rehab homes. If it's the new properties that municipalities need to rezone, what about looking at those rehabbing homes?
I am not a single home builder. I know what I hear, and it's more challenging to redevelop, refurbish a home than it is build new. Those are fix and flip type of individuals. Most of the housing stock out there that has not already been redeveloped is 60, 70, 80 years old. It's already beyond repair. It's better to just build new. And just to address the single family homes, the national builders out there aren't going into neighborhoods unless it has a starting price of $500,000. We've tried to attract some national builders into Wisconsin. It's a challenge. The price point that people are looking at is that $275 to $325 range. And you can only build at that price point if the infrastructure and the lot is for free. And I know that's a repeat of something I said before, but it's something we can't say often enough, and that's what we work to solve for.
In terms of rehab, right, it can be done. It's just, there's no economies of scale. There's no labor. And so all the partnerships that are successful, like Eau Claire Housing Authority has a good program, a lot of home repair dollars in Dane County, Road Home, Project Home. These all are significant nonprofit entities that have a government or a nonprofit component, right? And so you're absolutely right. I mean, it's also really hard for a young person moving to this area to say, okay, I'm gonna buy an older home and fix it up while I'm in it, because the financing just doesn't work, right? Because oftentimes it might be that your as repaired value, right, is not gonna meet the appraisal to make the mortgage work, because then you're over 100% loan to value, right? And so the loan program that the legislature approved will be some low-cost dollars for home repair, right? We saw during the Wisconsin Help for Homeowners that a lot of the request was for home repair dollars, particularly for seniors. Right? I think of my own mom. When she died a year ago, the house had so much deferred maintenance, right? So, you know, you maybe buy that house for, this is in Wausau. You buy it for 160, you put 80 into it, your all-in cost is 220. You might not get that appraisal, right? And so that's where a municipality really needs to think about, yeah, how can we maybe acquire a property, work with a nonprofit, help put an affordable home ownership component for a young working family. But again, it's hard to scale up when you're in the red on every transaction, right? And that's where we need more dollars for home repair. You know, or companies like, you can create a workforce housing sort of fund amongst employers, where maybe you're helping people with down payment assistance, or maybe the companies will say, we will eat the cost of that loan, you know, it'll amortize 10% every year or whatever, and we'll help you get into a home so that you can stay and be close to work. It can be done, right? It's just if you lose money on every transaction, it's hard to make it up in scale.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and for the questions, again, you can put some in your Mentimeter, and we'll try to answer those if you haven't already. A couple times it's been mentioned about the legislature. I want to thank, we have Representative Tyler August here. Thank you for being here and for helping get that through the legislature. I think it's going to be really great. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Derek. As Derek said, I'm with the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, and Ben McKay, Deputy Director. So I'll spend just a few minutes talking a little bit about, as Derek mentioned, kind of what the housing booklet is, why we put it together, what's included. We won't go over all the details, and maybe just hit on a few key pieces of information in this booklet and kind of compare how Walworth County is doing to the rest of the 7-county region. So out with and I think Administrator Liberta already talked about what the CHIP is, or the Community Health Improvement Plan. We'll use that summary, but I do want to point out that that plan has several goals in it. One of those goals was goal 3.2, to strengthen coordination, implementation of plans for healthy community development within Walworth County. So that goal had a work group. That work group had many discussions, and then quickly those discussions focused on the need for housing. And because this is a community health improvement plan, you know, the focus is, well, how does housing really affect community health? And there's a number of reasons that I think are probably relatively obvious. It's obviously housing is a basic need. Shelter is a basic need. Being able to have enough money in your budget left over after paying for housing for things like, you know, attaining healthy foods, adequate health care, and just really peace of mind certainly affect community health. As well, maybe some more compact development, multifamily housing development, some of the missing middle development that Professor Paulson talks about in some of his studies can be the backbone of walkable neighborhoods too. Of course, we might have to talk about sidewalks to achieve those walkable neighborhoods, but certainly that can lead to a more active lifestyle if you can walk from your home to a park, to a school, to a business, wherever you may want to go. So those are all some of the ways that housing would affect community health. So the booklet includes a couple different sections, including, you know, how much housing do we need. We use some sewer pack population, household, and employment projections to determine what the unit need in Walworth County might be over the next 7 years out to 2030, and then even out to 2050. So as Derek mentioned, by 2030, based on sewer pack projections, we would probably need about 5,600 additional housing units in the county. And in comparison, over the last 10 years, I think we've only seen about 3,700 total units developed in the county. So we're needing to make up some ground there, as I think Professor Paulson had talked about. And as well, looking all the way up to 2050, we would need 17,000 new housing units to keep up with those sewer pack population projections, which are actually relatively modest for the slower growing southeastern Wisconsin region, also as Professor Paulson talked about, in comparison to some other parts of the country, but it's still a large number of units compared to what we have done over the last 10 years. We also wanted to look at how much, what kind of housing will we need here. There's a lot of socioeconomic data, income data, housing cost burden data that you can all look at in the booklet and take that home with you. And hopefully this drives home one of the purposes of the booklet was for having easy to use information for our local decision makers when evaluating decisions around housing development and maybe long-range comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances. So, you know, there's good information in there. I think just looking at some basic information, cost housing burden, Walworth County is not actually doing terrible compared to the rest of the region and the state. However, we still have over 40% of our renters paying more than 30% of their annual or their household income on housing costs, which is too much and maybe not leaving enough left over for those other needs that we talked about, whether it's food, healthcare, transportation, whatever it may be. So what kind of housing do we need? We've spent some time looking at, you know, things, what kind of housing structures, what kind of units do we have in Walworth County? What we see is probably not a surprise and talked about by the previous speakers. We have a lot of single family housing in the county, not a lot of multifamily housing. We'll kind of see that reflected in a few quick analysis slides that I have in just a minute. So it covers what kind of housing do we have as well. What are the needs of our businesses? I think workforce housing is an important factor, something we talk a lot about in our work group. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a minute, and also what can communities do. We've talked a lot about that already, but I think I have one slide that will also sort of support what we've already talked about, but what communities can do. This is one of the analyses that I want to point out to kind of show how Walworth County is doing compared to the rest of the region in the job housing balance, which was introduced by Professor Paulson in his presentation. But almost 10 years ago now, when we developed the regional housing plan, so SewerPAC developed a regional housing plan that was adopted by the Commission in 2013, as well as endorsed by Walworth County probably in 2013 or 2014. One of the prime or key analyses that we did was looking at the number of jobs and housing units on the ground at that time and what was being planned for in community comprehensive plans, and asking, is there a balance between the type and amount of jobs that are being anticipated in our communities compared to the type and amount of housing that's being anticipated in our communities, planned for in our communities, and were already on the ground at the time. So that's what we see on the map. I think the key thing to point out is the communities in blue. That is where Walworth County is seeing a shortage, which I think is no surprise to our audience members here today. That would be multifamily housing compared to lower wage jobs, which would tend to be retail jobs, service jobs, jobs in food and accommodation, jobs that Walworth County has a lot of. So you can see on the map, that is probably where Walworth County is not producing as many housing units compared to, or planning for as many multifamily housing units compared to our other communities across the region. Looking at single family housing compared to moderate wage jobs that you might find in an industrial park or an office park, Walworth County communities are not doing too bad there. That there is more of a balance that is either existing or being planned for in our communities there. So this will be basically my last slide, just talking a little bit about zoning and what our communities are currently doing in Walworth County compared to the rest of our communities across southeastern Wisconsin. Here we wanted to look at both single-family zoning and multifamily zoning. We were looking at our communities allowing for at least one zoning district in our community, a smaller lot size of 10,000 square feet or less, or a more modest home size, and that's what we see on the map labeled single family. So we see that a number of communities really across the entire region and in Walworth County are not allowing for either the smaller lot size or home size or both, although we're still doing okay in our job housing balance here. Looking at multifamily, we're looking at our communities allowing for higher densities that might support affordability. Are they allowing for a smaller apartment size that might support affordability? In here, we're not doing quite as good. We have a few more communities in Walworth County that don't have at least one zoning district in our community that are allowing for the more dense apartments or the smaller unit sizes that might promote affordability for a wider range of households. So just talking about a few key recommendations that are in our housing booklet. These come directly from the regional housing plan, and there are many more recommendations in the regional housing plan, but these are really pointed towards our local governments with public sewer service. So that would be, again, looking at zoning ordinances and comprehensive plans and determining, is our community allowing through our regulations and our long-range planning the types of housing units that are going to be affordable to our workforce and just enough housing overall. I think that's important to talk about as well. In addition, sewer communities can certainly use flexible zoning regulations, I think which were touched on a little bit in the presentation before, whether it be through maybe PUD, density bonuses, accessory dwelling units, or converting non-residential buildings to residential uses, which may have its challenges, as was talked about, but something that could be looked at. And as well, something that's been popular across the state, gaining popularity in our region, and I think at least one community in Walworth County has undertaken this, and that's extending TIF districts for at least 1 year, for actually a maximum of 1 year, to support the development of housing anywhere within their community, not just within the district. So if you do want to learn more about the regional housing plan and all 50 recommendations for not only city and village governments, but state and federal agencies, that is available on the SewerPEC website at www.sewrpc.org. Thank you.
So we're going to now, I'm excited here to start with some of our panels. So I'd like to invite our municipal leaders that are on the panel here to come up, and we're going to ask a few questions. You know, the first thing I guess I'd like to talk about, we've talked about comprehensive plans. All the municipalities have them. But just curious if you have action plans around housing, and how does that work with public participation, you know, at council meetings? How are you getting input, or what's the best way to get input? What do you do with that input from your count? Are you not getting input? But really essentially just trying to get at, you know, do you have that housing as an initiative in the comprehensive plan? I think everybody does. Have you put some action plans together? Yes, no. And then how important is it to get feedback from your constituents? So somebody could start us off a little bit with that.
I think it's important to notice, as Derek said, that housing certainly is an initiative in our comprehensive plan. Today I'm here to learn too. I think it's really important that we educate our council members and plan commission members on these issues. So I think that is one of the challenges and barriers right now. As we were talking, and I think it was you, Kurt, who talked about, and the previous speaker, the need to acquire the land and infrastructure. I think that's an important note, and that's something I know I need to go back and educate my plan commission and build board on.
So, oh, that's loud. Good morning. Whitewater is the community in the SewerPEC study that had extended their tax increment financing district for a year. We've also executed, I'm happy to say, I think almost all of the recommendations on that recommendation slide, so good for Whitewater. Yeah. What that means for developers in this room is our staff took $1.9 million that was carried over from the tax increment financing district that exists in cash, that I think is at First Citizens Bank, actually. We wrote a policy, and that divides the money into 4 basic buckets. The smallest bucket was providing some additional money to the CDA because they have a fund for housing rehab. So we checked that box. The second smallest bucket, and they're equally big, is developers and home buyers. And developers are eligible for up to $25,000 per unit for single-family housing that targets people spending less than 30% of their monthly income on principal and interest payments. And I know that was a mouthful, but we have websites. I have 2 staff here. We have a table in the back room with all this information. Second bucket is for home buyers. Home buyers at or below 100% of HUD income limits for the area are eligible. So that's a big number. For a 4-person household, that's about $100,000 a year. So this specifically is trying to cast a wide net for people who need it, provides up to $25,000 in direct mortgage assistance at time of closing in a forgivable loan that never has to be repaid as long as you stay in that home. The largest bucket is the city can at its discretion use that money to buy land, install infrastructure, and sell lots, provided that the home buyers and developers meet the criteria within the policy. And that's the step we're gearing up for. So shameless plug for Whitewater, we are in the process of mapping out a 67-acre single-family development where the city would conceivably acquire the land, install the infrastructure, and sell the lots. And we're going to try and hit a lot rate of $40,000 to $50,000, which we know is attractive. So that's what we're doing in Whitewater. I'll turn it over to the rest of the communities, and then I will try and respond accordingly. What I will say is it can be done. It can be done. These homes are going to come online for one of our projects that is in the pipeline that the CDA has seen in closed session is about $300,000 to $320,000. These are slab on grade, but it's 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2-car garages, ranch style and 2-story style, and that will be the project that gets kicked off. That's in an existing tax increment financing district. We will use that money to build additional infrastructure and provide additional incentives. Okay, I'll stop with that. Thank you.
I guess going down the line here, I'll just throw out a few thoughts. City of Delavan revised its comprehensive plan in 2020 after a lot of extensive community input and such. It was actually before I got there, but I know that they put a lot of time and effort into it, and I don't think anyone still could predict what today's housing market was going to look like in 3 years. I would almost say it's outdated already. I mean, we still had a model coming back off of the recession to be able to get existing subdivisions built. And right now, at our record-breaking high number of single-family home permits, we're at 60 right now for the year, which is more than they've ever had in a single year. We've got a project that's been approved for 2 77-unit market rate multifamily buildings. That actually pushes us over what our comp plan says for our percentage of multifamily a little bit. So we know right there already our comp plan's getting broken. We had to do a variance on that project because the density per acre was higher than what our comp plan allows. But they were able to justify that by building parking underneath structures instead of requiring a lot of acreage for parking. So we're learning things as we go. And we know that if we're going to keep up any kind of single family housing, we need land now and more lots because we're running out. But the good thing is, like I said, we're getting some subdivisions built that had been sitting half finished for decades. But now we're running into that point where we need to look at other options, and we even recently hosted a small local round table with WCEDA officials. Jeff was there as well as his boss, the director of WCEDA statewide. We had business owners, representatives of the school district, and other organizations there to discuss housing needs. And it keeps coming down to, yeah, we've got lots of good single family housing, but nobody with the jobs in the area, like new school teachers and such, can afford to buy the new houses. So what do? And we've got to find solutions. And I think I've got some good ideas here today, and we'll be taking those back. Oh, I have. Go ahead.
Yeah, as Derek said, I'm Swan from the city of Elkhorn, and everybody's given their infomercial so far this morning, so I guess I'll do the same. Yeah, I mean, as my colleagues have said, I think cities right now, both from the administrative perspective, but more so from the governing bodies, are becoming much more flexible, I think, and understand that housing is a crisis. And so I've seen, I've been at Elkhorn for 1.5 years, so obviously I can't say I have institutional knowledge of necessarily everybody, but from my understanding of prior planning commissions and councils, they were more I'd say they're stricter on density requirements and setback requirements and just projects in general, and it seems like there's much more of a willingness. So to any developers out there, I've met with a lot of you, and I've recognized you, and some of you have already come up to me this morning, so thank you for that. And anyone I've talked to about projects, I've said, come, if you have an idea, come and let's hear what it is, because I think there's just a much more willingness to try and make projects happen. We're currently working, and Ryan Cardinal is staring at me, so I think because we're working with Ryan Cardinal from Cardinal Engineering and Creekside Development on a 850 mixed-use development in Elkhorn. The general development plan is on the next planning commission meeting in October, and it's been a really good experience working with both Cardinal and Creekside. So I don't know if any of you know Tronomy, but they're the ones kind of behind the scenes on that project. So that's an indication of one project where it was in an area that was zoned in the comp plan as being future industrial and just a smidge of commercial. And because of the housing need and the realization that maybe industrial wasn't the best use of that area in the comp plan, the comp plan and council approved changing that to a residential area. So that's one indication where, the comp plans, as my colleagues have said, are kind of outdated, and we need to be more flexible on making them work for the projects that are out there and that are going to really help the community. So I would just say, we're trying to be more flexible, more helpful, and there's really good things happening in Elkhorn too. And I just think in the county as a whole, unfortunately, our Illinois brethren seem to be moving up here, so that's just both good and bad. But we are seeing a lot of interest in the county and the city, and I'm getting a lot of calls from developers, both commercial and residential. So this is the place to be. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Nick, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Derek asked me to be here to kind of represent the towns. I'm with Nick Sigmund with the Walworth County Zoning Office. Of course, most of the areas that we're dealing with are unincorporated areas. There's not a lot of municipal sewer available where this higher density stuff might land. But we did recently just do I think we worked with Brian too on the 2 units, I think 17 2 units in a sewered area by Lyons. And we worked with Geneva National recently to do some employer housing type stuff and so on. But we're open to any suggestions as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's partly, or did you want to say something, Alan? Go ahead.
Is that working? Okay. I just wanted to add, when we updated our comp plan, and I will echo, it's outdated already, but one of the things they had identified is the declining house size of a household and affordability at that time, which has drastically changed, as we saw on that slide. And they did, one of their action plans was to adopt a cottage housing ordinance, which we have adopted in the village of East Troy. I haven't gotten a lot of interest from developers on it. I haven't been able to connect with a lot of developers, but I am asking developers for feedback on that. I've had one in the room who was kind enough to share their feedback, but I do have that example ordinance on the back table with my business card. So if you would be so kind, if that's something that interests you to review it, I would welcome your feedback. I think there might be some cost barriers that now exist that may not have existed or that we were not aware of when we developed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess part of why I wanted to feature the administrators and people who are up here right now is just for everyone to see that, that there's been this thought, I think, that developers will say, hey, the administrators in the cities and towns and villages, they're really not willing to work with people, and yet you can hear from 5 people right now that are working with, and they're taking that back to their boards, and they're encouraging their boards and councils to think out of the box and start to consider things differently. So I think that's partly what I wanted people to know about that. I think I'm just going to throw one more thing out here before our break. One thing that I'll hear from builders is they'll say that, geez, every municipality has its own process, and it seems like it's a bit of a learning curve for each community. And I've had them, mention to me, is there a way to standardize some of that? And I don't know that there is, but I'm just curious the thoughts. Just brief, whether you think that's possible, or if you think your system, you've kind of gotten it down.
I can tell you ours is alarmingly straightforward. Having worked in 2 communities in Alice nodding, he knows, in Walworth County, at least Mugwanago, the tip of it touched Walworth County. We have a plan and architectural review commission that approves essentially everything that doesn't require a developer's agreement. It just ends at that level. It's a committee level meeting. It doesn't involve council approval. And all of our permitting process after that is handled at staff level. So I would encourage anyone who wants to know more about that. Again, my chief of staff is here. I'll be around for a little bit. Planned unit developments approved at committee level only. Conditional uses approved, alarmingly straightforward. Approved conditional uses approved at committee level only. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've got a great plan architectural review commission. We've got a robust process, but we've removed a lot of the duplicative hurdles to that process. So I can only speak for Whitewater, and I inherited this about a year ago. So I would say it doesn't all have to be bad, and you can handle things at staff level and make it work. So
I think the main thing I could say about City of Delavan, I really liked when I got on board there that they had a process already in place for talking to developers, whether it's commercial or residential. We have a committee of staff that includes our building inspector, zoning, planner, fire inspector, and myself, and we meet every other Thursday, the first and third Thursdays of the month. And what we will do is we basically have an open time to sit down with potential developers, hear their pitch, and kind of talk them through our zoning, talk them through our permitting requirements, what the timetable looks like, and whether or not there's any issues with the comp plan with what they want to do. And it's a nice way to kind of get people in the door, at least, without saying, all right, we need to see a permit first, and we need to see fees first. This is kind of your free consultation with staff for us, so we can kind of dedicate some time to help you maybe iron out some of the roadblocks and hazards you might run into. That's been a really good process, I think, and something we're going to keep going and doing. When I got the question about the, I kind of knew that we were going to have to be asked a question about standardizing processes. I think each community, so far as like housing development, is going to have its own needs and requirements based off its comp plan. So I don't know if you can do a county-wide process like that. But I think what would be good from the county side of things would be that, just listening to some of the presentations this morning and the need for having a TID to make a multifamily, affordable and market rate development work. I think if there's going to be any emphasis from a county level, it would be on maybe coming up with standards for projects that might incorporate that mixed use affordable housing, and then basically so that we can know that we're going to have a smooth process getting a TID approved and not a lot of conflict or other resistance to it, just having everybody on board and kind of knowing that these are the standards, these are the kind of lots we've got to have, and this is what we need. That might be something we could put like countywide, and maybe something like that could also incorporate the 1-year extension automatically. Just know that we're going to be doing that based on the requirements of getting the TID.
Sure. Okay. Well, good. Again, really wanted people just to get familiar with, some of the people that they might be working with, and open lines of communication, and just let people know that everybody's willing to work and try to help solve this solution.